All right, you could go.
Good day, everyone. Today, myself, Simon Rambaros, together with my group members, Jania McKnight and Shalini Katu, will be presenting Chapter 15, Leading Change from Richard L. Daft's The Leadership Experience textbook. This chapter explores one of the most important aspects of leadership, guiding people and organizations through change. We look at why change is necessary, how leaders influence it, and the steps they can take to make it successful. By the end of our session, you should understand not only what change leadership is, but how you can apply it in your own life and career. Our learning objectives are: you should be able to describe Cutter's 8-stage model of leading change, identify strategies for everyday leadership and innovation, discuss how to overcome resistance to change, and be able to apply change leadership principles in real life situations. Let's start with a simple but powerful example of how difficult change really is: the story of the compact fluorescent light bulb. Compact fluorescent bulbs have actually been around for over 20 years, yet most people still prefer to buy the traditional incandescent bulbs that were invented before 1960. Companies like Philips Electronics, which developed the compact fluorescent bulb in the early 1980s, have spent millions of dollars on research, marketing, and education to convince consumers to switch, but with limited success. Why? Because people resist change. Even though these new bulbs use 75 to 80% less energy and last longer, they had one major disadvantage: they looked and felt different. People didn't like the cooler, less warm light they give off. Even after years of improvement, many consumers still associate fluorescent lighting with harsh, unattractive office environments. This story illustrates a key point we'll keep coming back to today: change, even when it's beneficial, often meets resistance. It's not just about logic, it's emotional and habitual. People cling to what's familiar, whether it's a light bulb or the way their company operates. Philips, General Electric, and Siemens all tried aggressive campaigns, rebates, education, partnerships with retailers like Walmart, but people still hesitated to change their habits. Now, if people resist switching something as small as a light bulb, imagine how much harder it is to change organizational behavior or workplace culture. Research shows that about two-thirds of organizational change efforts fail, and this resistance isn't just in business. Studies have found that even 90% of heart bypass patients don't change their unhealthy lifestyles after surgery. So, resistance to change is deeply human. The message here is that leaders play a critical role in helping people move through that resistance. They have to communicate, motivate, and guide people through uncertainty and discomfort. As Daft puts it, leadership is about change rather than stability. And in today's fast paced environment, leaders often feel like they're flying the airplane while building it. The old ways no longer work, but the new ones haven't fully proven themselves yet. That's the challenge and the opportunity of leading change. Now that we've seen how hard it can be to get people to change something as simple as a light bulb, imagine trying to change an entire organization. There's a famous quote from Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric, who said, "When the rate of change outside exceeds the rate of change inside, the end is in sight." What he meant is that if your organization can't keep up with what's happening around it, it's not going to survive. Why this matters today? Think about how fast the world is changing right now. We have new technologies emerging every few months, a globalized economy where companies compete across borders, shifting markets, and geopolitical issues, the rise of e business, and of course, information spreading instantly through social media and the internet. All these environmental forces are like waves, constant, powerful, and unpredictable. If a company doesn't learn to surf those waves, it's going to sink. The real challenges for organizations. Most organizations don't actually fail because they make bad products or hire the wrong people. They fail because they don't adapt fast enough. They get comfortable. They keep doing things the old way because it used to work. Look at companies like Blockbuster or Nokia. They didn't fail because people stopped liking movies or phones. They failed because they didn't respond to how the world was changing around them. The solution? So, what's the solution? It's not just new technology or bigger budgets, it's better leadership. Leaders set the tone for change. They model it, communicate it, and motivate others to move forward, even when change feels uncomfortable. Think about it. If leaders are nervous, resistant, or disconnected from what's happening outside, then their teams will be too. But when leaders embrace change, when they stay curious, committed, and confident, people follow. Research shows that strong change leaders share some common traits. They define themselves as change leaders rather than people who want to maintain the status quo. They demonstrate courage. They believe in employees' capacity to assume responsibility. They are able to assimilate and articulate values that promote adaptability. They recognize and learn from their own mistakes. They are capable of managing complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity. They have vision and can describe their vision for the future in vivid terms. They're committed. They don't give up halfway. They're communicators. They explain not just what's changing, but why. And they're role models. They live the change they want to see in others. So, as future leaders, whether in business, government, or your own projects, remember this: change isn't something to fear, it's something to lead. So, when you hear the phrase change or perish, don't think of it as a threat. Think of it as a call to action for leaders like us. Barbara Wall is an example of someone who exhibited some of these traits as traits of change leadership. So far, we've talked about how organizations must change to survive and that good leadership is key to making that happen. But here's the thing: you don't have to be a CEO or a top executive to be a change leader. To prove that, let's look at the story of Barbara Wall, someone who had made a massive impact at Hewlett Packard or HP, starting from a mid level personnel position. Barbara Wall worked at HP Labs, not exactly the department you'd expect to lead big company wide transformations. But what made her special was her mindset. She saw herself as a change agent, someone who believed things could always be improved. She had a clear vision to make HP Labs the world's best industrial research lab. And instead of keeping that vision to herself, she brought people together, dozens of them, to talk about that vision, what that vision could look like, make it real. Wa wasn't afraid to challenge senior executives either. She believed that sometimes leaders get too far away from the daily reality of the organization, and she wasn't scared to call that out. In her own words, she said, "To be a change leader, you have to always be willing to lose your job." Now that's courage. Think about that. She wasn't driven by fear of losing status or approval. She was driven by purpose. One of the most powerful things War did was how she helped others take ownership of change. For example, she worked with a man named Tanha, a Vietnamese refugee who was sending money to a Buddhist orphanage in Bangladesh. The money kept disappearing before reaching the children. When he brought this problem to War, she didn't just take over. Instead, she said, "I can't solve this for you, but I can help you get involved in the project that can solve it." That project became part of HP's initiative to develop low-cost communication technology for developing countries. This story shows how true leaders don't just fix problems, they empower others to become problem solvers. Because of her mindset and her influence, work contributed to faster product development, about a 20% reduction in research and development life cycles, new mentoring programs for engineers, and improved collaboration across departments. She eventually became HP's worldwide change manager, but remember, she started from the middle, not the top. So, what we can learn from Barbara Wall's story: that you don't need a title to lead change. Leadership is about behavior, not position. Change happens when people at any level take initiative, believe in a better future, and help others see how to get there. That's the kind of leadership every organization needs more of. Okay, So now that we've seen why change is necessary and how anyone can lead it, let's move into the most important part, how leaders actually make big, lasting change happen. This is where John Cutter's eight-stage model of leading major change comes in. It's basically a roadmap, a step-by-step process that successful leaders follow when transforming organizations. When we talk about big changes like company restructures, culture shifts, or digital transformations, they don't happen overnight. Change is not a single event, it is a journey. Leaders guide people through stages, and if you skip one, the whole process can fall apart. So let's walk through each of Cutter's eight stages, and I'll share quick real examples to make them easy to remember. Stage one, leaders establish a sense of urgency. Everything starts with urgency. People won't change unless they see why change is needed. For example, at Volkswagen, major scandals and financial crises forced leaders to face reality. Employees suddenly realized we either fix this or we don't survive. But in many cases, there's no crisis to wake people up. That's when leaders have to create urgency by showing data, trends, or threats that make the need for change clear. Without urgency, nothing moves. Stage two, establishing a coalition. Next, leaders form a strong coalition, a group of people with enough influence and teamwork to drive the change. You can't do it alone. For instance, at Master Brand Industries, they brought 75 key managers together in an offsite retreat to build commitment and teamwork. That shared sense of ownership is what gets the momentum going. Stage three, develop a vision and strategy. This is where leaders answer the big question, what does the future look like? A, a clear, inspiring vision gives people direction and hope. At Yellow Fright Systems, the CEO, Bill Zollers, had a vision to turn a traditional trucking company into a customer service powerhouse. His strategy, empower employees and build advanced systems to make delivery faster and more reliable. Stage four, communicate the vision and strategy. Once you have the vision, you can't just write it in a memo. You have to communicate it everywhere, over and over again. Leaders at Yellow Fright repeated their message constantly. Solas personally visited terminals around the country, talking directly with employees about the new direction. He said, repetition is important, especially when you're trying to change the way a company thinks about itself. So the rule here is, if you think you've communicated enough, do it 10 times more. Stage five, empower employees throughout the organization. This stage is all about removing barriers that stop people from changing. That might mean changing systems, removing rigid rules, or giving employees more freedom and information. For example, Yellowfright invested in new information systems so frontline workers could solve customer problems themselves without waiting for approval. Empowerment turns followers into leaders. Stage six, generate short-term wins. This one is crucial. Change takes time and people lose motivation if they don't see progress. So leaders plan for small, visible victories early on, something that says, hey, this is working. At the US Mint, Philip Deal set an early goal, process 95% of point orders within 6 weeks. It wasn't perfect, but it was a huge improvement. When employees saw that win, they got energized and kept pushing forward. Stage seven, keep up the urgency. Once you get a few wins, don't stop. This is where a lot of leaders go wrong. They declare victory too soon. Instead, use those wins to build momentum and tackle bigger challenges. Leaders should keep reinforcing the vision, reworking systems, and hiring or promoting people who truly believe in the change. Stage eight, make the changes stick. Finally, leaders make the change stick. The goal is to embed new values and behaviors into the company's DNA so that people don't see it as new anymore, but just how we do things here. This might include storytelling, celebrating success, and promoting people who model the new culture. That's how change becomes lasting. So, in summary, Kata's eight-stage model teaches us that successful change is structured, human, and intentional. You can't just tell people to change. You guide them, motivate them, and celebrate progress along the way. And remember, change fails when we rush it. Change succeeds when leaders commit to every stage. And that brings us to the end of my section on leading major change and Cutter's 8-stage model. Now that we've looked at how leaders guide large planned transformations, let's shift gears and look at change on a smaller, more personal scale, the kind of change that happens every day in workplaces. To take us through this next part, titled Leading Everyday Change, I'll now hand over to Jania, who will explain how leaders can influence people and organizations through small but powerful daily actions.
Good day, everyone. I will be covering leading everyday change and innovation. So, leading everyday change is not only about guiding organizations through small ongoing adjustments that happen continuously in the normal course of work. Unlike large-scale transformations, these changes are often subtitled but are essential for keeping the organization flexible, efficient, and responsive to challenges. According to the DAFT, page 459, leaders who manage these everyday change successfully create an environment where employees feel supported or understand the purpose behind even minor adjustments. These changes can include introducing new technologies, refining workflow processes, adjusting team responsibilities, or implementing feedback from customers or staff. By handling these challenges effectively, leaders ensure that the organization maintains steady process without overwhelming employees or creating unnecessary disruption. Everyday change, therefore, is not just optional, it's also about shaping culture, building resilience, and fostering a mindset where adaptation is expected and valued. One important aspect of leading everyday change is modeling the behavior you want to see. The DAFT emphasizes that leaders demonstrate how to handle change through their own actions, setting the tone for the rest of the organization. When leaders are open to new ideas, willing to learn from mistakes, and flexible in their approach, employees are more likely to adapt similar behaviors. This modeling creates a kind of self-expression in leadership where employees see tangible examples of adaptability and innovation. For instance, a manager who actively uses a new system and encourages experimentation shows the team that change is not something to fear, but something to engage with. By behaving in ways that reflect the organization's values and desired practices, leaders can influence attitudes and actions far more effectively than through instructions alone. Dealing with opposition is another key element of leading everyday change. Resistance from employees are natural, as change can create uncertainty, uncertain, uncertain, uncertainty, and challenge established routines, or even raise concerns about personal performance. The DAF highlights that effective leaders do not see resistance as a problem to ignore, but as a chance to teach and engage. Turning opposition into teachable moments includes listening carefully to concerns, validating feelings, and explaining how the change contributes to organizational goals. For example, if a team member resists using a new reporting system, a leader might demonstrate its benefits, provide additional guidance, and involve the employee in refining the process. By adjusting resistance constructively, leaders not only reduce fear but also strengthen trust, engagement, and commitment to ongoing improvement. Leaders must also recognize and create the right opportunities for employees during change. Sharing credit and visibility for success encourages engagement and motivation as employees feel their contributions are recognized and valued. Highlighting achievements publicly, providing praise for problem solving, and giving team members responsibilities for aspects of the change process helps reinforce desired behaviors. These opportunities also allow employees to grow in confidence, experiment with new approaches, and develop leadership skills themselves. By fostering a culture of recognition and shared accomplishment, leaders build a more committed workforce that embraces change rather than fearing it. Now, moving on to innovation, which creates self-expression, right words, right opportunities, and alliance building. Innovation is not only about creating new products or services, it's also about encouraging employees to express ideas and experiment within the organization. Leaders who promote innovation help employees see opportunities to contribute in ways that reflect their skills, creativity, and personal insights. One way to do this is through self-expression. When leaders model innovative behavior, they show employees how to think creatively, take calculated risks, and embrace problem solving as part of their everyday work. By openly experimenting with new approaches themselves, leaders normalize curiosity and flexibility, signaling that trying new methods are both safe and encouraged. This creates an environment where innovation is part of everyday behavior rather than a separate project or occasional activity. Now, please enjoy a short clip of Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, talking about fostering a growth mindset and innovation in teams.
In that moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a consummate insider. I've grown up at Microsoft now 28 years. I also recognize, to your point, that I was taking over from Steve and Bill, and Steve, even though was not a founder, he had founder status in the company. Bill and Steve built the company. Bill and Paul founded the company. And the one thing that perhaps I was more grounded, having worked with them, is as a non-founder CEO, I needed to make explicit some of the things that I think founder CEOs can take for granted, because founder CEOs can carry, just because of who they are and what they mean to the organization, a lot, and telegraph that very broadly and have followership. Whereas I describe myself as a mere mortal CEO, I felt I needed that sense of purpose to be deeply rekindled, is something that I reinforced. And culture, both sort of these two pillars of sense of purpose and culture, needed to become much more explicit. For example, when I joined Microsoft in '92, we used to talk about our mission as putting a PC in every home and every desk. It was pretty inspiring, right? I mean, you could even do an Excel spreadsheet, P times Q. It was easy to compute. And except by the late 90s, we had more or less achieved that, at least in the developed world. And since then, we had this struggle of what's next. And I felt like I needed to sort of go back, in fact, to the very origin of the company, right? I mean, Microsoft got started when we built, or Paul and Bill built, the basic interpreter for the Altair. And I believe that everything that needs to be known about Microsoft in 2019 can be traced back to our origin, which is we build technology so that others can build more technology, right? I felt like we were doing things out of envy and others. We needed to get back to what our core identity is, right? Especially in 2019, where every company is a software company around the world. We can just basically be a software platform and tools provider and have a good business. And so I felt, let's be proud of who we are. Of course, we got to express it differently. And then, really reinforce that. That's why we talk about our mission around empowering people and organizations. The other piece, though, is we had to work on our culture. I distinctly remember, I guess it was '98 when we first became the largest market cap company in the world. And many of us, who were lucky enough to participate on that wave of growth. But I remember that day when we walked around, you could see in in campus, people thought, wow, we must be God's gifts to mankind. Right? We're so smart, we're so good, look at us. And except that was not the case. I mean, the case was, it's a temporal thing, and it only matters, what matters is your ability to learn, grow, be grounded in the realities and our customers and what have you. And so that's why I wanted a culture that stood for that learning organization. And in fact, my wife had introduced me to a book by a Stanford professor, Carol Dweck, which I read, Mindset, many years before I became CEO. It was a huge influence in our household as it relates to our own children's education. But quite frankly, it was a great education for me, because when I read that book, I realized that notion of growth mindset applies to individuals like me. It applies to companies like Microsoft. So we took that meme of growth mindset and said, look, let's not be know-it-alls, let's be learn-it-alls. And has been a very helpful part of, I would say, our journey around this. What is a cultural meme that we can even make first class, that we can have a real dialogue on?
Absolutely.
As we just heard, Satya Nadella highlights how a leader's mindset and behavior set the tone for innovation and change. This reinforces the idea that every leader must model the change they want to see in others. Now, moving back on to right words. Right words is a concept that highlights the importance of communication when leading change and innovation. According to the DAFT, the way leaders frame challenges or setbacks can turn opposition into teachable moments. For example, instead of criticizing a team member for failing to meet expectations during a pilot project, a leader might say, this gives us a chance to see what works and what we can improve together. This approach reduces defensiveness, reinforces learning, and encourages participation. By choosing language that emphasizes growth, collaboration, and learning, leaders create a positive climate for change and innovation. Right opportunities. Right opportunities refers to creating solutions where employees can gain recognition, share credit, and build visibility for their contributions. We see that leaders who provide such opportunities strengthen motivation, engagement, and retention. For instance, inviting employees to present their innovative ideas at team meetings, acknowledging them in newsletters, or giving them ownership over projects allows the staff to experience personal growth while contributing to the organizational goals. When employees see that their input are valued and rewarded, they are more likely to engage in creative problem solving and support broader change efforts. Alliance building. Alliance building is the final component in the set of strategies for leading innovation. Leaders must actively create partnerships across departments and teams to ensure that the new ideas have the support, resources, and coordination they need to succeed. Alliances help overcome barriers, secure resources, and bring Alliances help overcome barriers, secure resources, and bring diverse work together, which is critical for implementing innovative solutions. Now, moving on to leading change through people, opposition, opportunities, and alliances. Change, even small everyday adjustments, often meets resistance. People are naturally wary of uncertainty, new routines, or tasks they haven't done before. Instead of seeing resistance as a barrier, effective leaders view it as an opportunity to guide and build stronger engagement. When a team member questions a new workflow, a leader can pause, listen, and ask clarifying questions about their concerns. This approach demonstrates respect for their perspective and opens a dialogue that often uncovers hidden obstacles or overlooked improvements. By embracing resistance, leaders create a culture where feedback is valued and employees feel safe expressing doubts rather than avoiding participation. Over time, this method reduces friction and improves understanding. Turning opposition into teachable moments also helps employees see the bigger picture. Leaders can explain how a change connects to organizational goals, performance improvements, or team benefits. This requires clear communication and patience. Imagine a scenario where a team struggles to adapt a new software system. Instead of insisting complication, a leader might walk them through the benefits, demonstrate the workflow, and encourage experimentation without penalty for mistakes. This not only builds skill, but also empowers employees to take ownership. Creating the right opportunities for employees is another crucial tool. When people are recognized for their contributions, given visibility, or allowed to take the lead on small projects, they become more motivated and encouraged. Leaders can share credit publicly for successful ideas, invite employees to present solutions in meetings, or give them responsibility over projects. These actions communicate trust and appreciation, showing that contribution matters and that innovation is rewarded. Establishing strong alliances is vital for turning change into a collective effort rather than an individual challenge. Effective leaders identify key allies, identify that key supporters, and effective leaders identify key supporters and involve them in shaping and promoting the change. These allies can help communicate the purpose behind new activities, address concerns among peers, and provide valuable feedback from different perspectives. Building these partnerships early foster trust, unity, and shared responsibility across the organization. When obstacles arise, allies can reinforce confidence and keep the momentum going. In this way, meaningful change is strengthened through collaboration, where success is achieved through combined effort and mutual commitment. Now, moving on to slide 4, we can focus on practical strategies for everyday innovation and leading change through behaviors like modeling and risk-taking. One of the most powerful ways leaders influence change is by modeling the behavior they want to see. When a leader actively demonstrates curiosity, creativity, and willingness to try new approaches, it sets the tone for the entire team. People pay attention not just to what leaders say, but to what they do. For example, if a manager is experimenting with a new project management tool, showing transparency about their mistakes and learning process encourages employees to feel safe trying new ideas themselves. Modeling behavior turns abstract concepts like innovation into visible, actionable practices. This approach also reinforces trust because employees see that the leader is not asking them to do something they wouldn't do themselves. Encouraging calculated risk-taking is another crucial element of leading everyday change. Leaders can frame experimentation as a learning process rather than a performance test. This might involve creating small programs, assigning stretch tasks, or asking employees to suggest alternative approaches to a current process. Creating opportunities for growth is closely connected to modeling and risk-taking. This not only motivates employees, but also builds confidence in their ability to handle change. For instance, a leader might invite a junior member to lead a small innovation project or present results to a larger group. Leaders also foster innovation by encouraging idea sharing and collaboration without necessarily framing it as alliances. This involves creating forums for discussion, brainstorming sessions, or informal meetings where employees feel comfortable voicing suggestions. By actively listening, acknowledging contribution, and turning ideas into practice, leaders reinforces that every voice matters. Moving on to fostering employee growth and development. One of the most important responsibilities of a leader is to create an environment where employees can grow and develop. Growth doesn't just happen naturally, it requires intentional actions from leaders. This includes giving people responsibilities that challenge their current skills, providing constructive feedback, and encouraging them to stretch beyond their comfort zones. When leaders approach growth as a structured, ongoing process, employees are more likely to develop confidence in their abilities. Coaching is a central tool for fostering growth. Effective leaders don't just tell people what to do, they guide, mentor, and ask questions that stimulate crucial thinking. This helps employees reflect on their own performance, identify areas for improvement, and create strategies to succeed. Rather than solving any problem for them, leaders act as a sounding board, encouraging employees to come up with solutions themselves. This approach not only builds capability, but also installs a sense of ownership and accountability for results. Autonomy is another key factor in employee growth. Giving people the freedom to make decisions within their area of responsibility empowers them and helps to learn from mistakes, also to discover new ways of doing things. Leaders can set clear goals and boundaries, but allow employee flexibility in how they achieve results. This balance between guidance and independence creates confidence, encourages creative thinking, and promotes engagement. Creating a learning-forced environment also means providing access to resources, training, and opportunities to collaborate with others. Leaders can arrange mentorship programs, workshops, or informal knowledge sharing sessions where employees learn from peers and leaders alike. By normalizing learning as a part of everyday work, leaders remove the stigma of asking questions or seeking help. Finally, leaders enforce growth by recognizing process and celebrating achievements, even small ones. Recognition doesn't have to be formal. A simple acknowledgement in a team meeting or a note of appreciation can motivate and reinforce positive behaviors. When employees see that their efforts are noticed and valued, they are more likely to continue developing their skills and contribute creatively to the team. Please enjoy this short clip of a leader speaking on his employees' success.
What happens when almost anything goes well in our lives in the moment, we get a little shot of dopamine. That gives us reinforcement. Recognition does the same thing. It gives people reinforcement for something that they did well. A couple keys to this particular element. One is that it has to be frequent. We word it in the last 7 days. Recognition is an ongoing need. It has to be frequent. Every time we should get something for that. Psychologically, it doesn't cost anything. We never get it perfect, but the way to get it more perfect is to think with each person and have a conversation with each person about just asking the simple question, how do you like to be recognized? And you'll find a lot of variation across people in terms of how they do like to be recognized. For some people, it's public recognition. In fact, for a lot of people, that's the best form of recognition, to have it given in public. But other people don't like that attention in public. They would rather have it to be more a one-on-one situation. But I was talking to a coworker once and asked her how she liked to be recognized, and she said every way possible. So there are people that like it, in person and in public as well. But another way to think about it is ask them what their best past recognition was. What's the best recognition you've ever received? That can give you some insights. These are just real simple questions that turn on some light bulbs, and it's going to vary by individual person. but managers are in the best position to do that right. The goal is to develop a culture where the expectation is that everybody on a team is responsible for recognition. And so to develop that kind of culture, there are all kinds of techniques you can use to have a culture where people can write notes to each other. I think email, of course, works really well for that, or not. But to make sure that people know that it's an expectation of everyone to notice when someone does something well and to let them know about it. This relates to one of the other elements in the Q12 around quality work. How do people know and respect the quality of work of their coworkers? They need to be responsible for watching for it and for letting people know when they see it. That builds trust.
This video is a great reminder that recognition doesn't have to be complicated or formal. Small gestures like a few words of appreciation or acknowledging someone's efforts can go a long way in motivating a team and reinforcing positive behavior. As leaders, it's important to make recognition part of our everyday interactions. Finally, practical takeaways for leaders. Leading everyday change is less about dramatic overhauls and more about consistently demonstrating the behaviors that encourage adapting to change, innovation, and growth. Effective leaders understand that change doesn't happen overnight. It's a series of small, intentional actions that influence culture, mindset, and performance. This includes modeling desired behaviors, giving employees opportunities to stretch and learn, providing constructive feedback, and celebrating incremental success. Leadership at high levels is about consistency, visibility, and taking authority, which together inspires trust and engagement in everyday work. Thank you all for listening. I will now pass you on to Shalini.
Thank you, Jania. I will now be taking us through leading creative people. Leaders of today's organizations have powerful reasons to encourage creativity. As discussed in Chapter 1, many organizations are undergoing fundamental transformations to respond to new challenges. They need employees to contribute new ideas. In addition, people can be more creative when they are helped to be open-minded, curious, and willing to take risks. Leaders can increase individual creativity by facilitating brainstorming, lateral thinking, and creative intuition. To begin with, we shall start off with brainstorming. According to idiou.com, the seven simple rules of brainstorming for better ideas and stronger collaboration includes deferring judgment. Creative spaces are judgment-free zones. They let ideas flow so people can build from each other's great ideas. Encouraging wild ideas. Embrace the most out-of-the-box notions. There's often not a whole lot of difference between outrageous and brilliant. Building on the ideas of others. Try to use and instead of but. It encourages positivity and inclusivity and leads to tons of ideas. Stay focused on the topic. Try to keep the discussion on target. Divergence is good, but you still need to keep your eyes on the prize. Have one conversation at a time. This can be difficult, especially with lots of creative people in a single room, but always think about the challenge topic and how to stay on track. Be visual. Use colored markers and post-its. Stick your ideas on the wall so others can visualize them. And lastly, go for quantity. Crank your ideas out quickly. For any 60-minute session, you should try to generate at least 100 ideas. Brainstorming has been found to be highly effective for quickly generating a wide range of creative alternatives. After all the ideas are expressed and recorded, the group can have another session to discuss and evaluate which ideas or combination will best solve the problem. Marissa Mayer, Director of Consumer Web Products at Google, has 8-hour-long brainstorming sessions each year. At each session, 6 concepts are pitched to 100 engineers and discussed for 10 minutes each. The goal is to build on and modify each concept. Recent improvements in the brainstorming process are to have people write down their ideas before coming to the brainstorming session and to go back and write down ideas immediately after the session. Taking advantage of each person's before and after thinking will increase creative output. Another recent approach called electronic brainstorming or brainwriting brings people together in an interactive group over a computer network. One member writes an idea, another reads it and adds other ideas, and so on. Studies show that electronic brainstorming generates about 40% more ideas than individuals brainstorming alone, and 25% to 200% more ideas than regular brainstorming groups, depending on group size. Why? Because each person is anonymous, and the sky's the limit in terms of what people feel free to say. Creativity also increases because people can write down their ideas immediately, avoiding the possibility that a good idea might slip away while the person is waiting for a chance to speak in a face to face group. Social inhibitions and concerns are avoided, which typically allows for a broader range of participation. Another advantage is that electronic brainstorming can potentially be done with groups made up of employees from around the world, further increasing the diversity of ideas. This then brings us to lateral thinking. This is where a set of systematic techniques used for changing mental concepts and perceptions and generating new ones. With lateral thinking, people move sideways to try different perceptions, different concepts, and different points of entry to gain a novel solution. Lateral thinking appears to solve a problem by an unorthodox method. Lateral thinking makes an unusual mental connection that is concerned with possibilities and what might be. To stimulate lateral thinking, leaders provide people with opportunities to use different parts of their brain and thus to make novel creative connections. When people take time off from working on a problem and change what they are doing, it is possible to activate different areas of the brain. If the answer isn't in the part of the brain being used, it might be in another that can be stimulated by a new experience. According to a blog post, Better Up, lateral thinking is important to increase adaptability and innovation in people who practice it. With new technologies like AI and shifting demands from the labor force, products and processes can become outdated quickly, and new ways of thinking offer more ways to overcome potential problems. Lateral thinking offers a framework for innovation that supports growth and change. It helps teams imagine the previously unimaginable and set themselves apart from the competition. Teams that can bring new perspectives to challenges will be more likely to stay with the curve and potentially create disruptive innovation that pushes the curve further ahead. Lateral thinking can be improved by recognizing thought patterns. People often make judgments or decisions based on the first piece of information they receive. With vertical thinking, this encourages this bias because it builds on what you already have. As new data or ideas arrive, you stack them on top of the existing information instead of innovating. But lateral thinkers are more often aware of their thought patterns, meaning they can better prevent biases and reorganize information. Asking why. You likely accept successful processes and services as unchangeable in your day-to-day professional life. Asking why and how you use those processes, even when things are going well, is a common creative approach in lateral thinking to challenge ideas and break cognitive biases. Figuring out why you or your team does something a certain way requires you to deconstruct the process and examine each element. This naturally brings forward new ideas and helps you find barriers you didn't even know were there. Considering all the alternatives, the logical outcome of problem solving is to find the most efficient solution. Lateral thinking encourages you to purposefully set aside the best answer and brainstorm alternative approaches regardless of how lofty they seem. Inviting external stimuli. Find new stimuli that encourages lateral thinking, like playing music to concentrate differently, taking breaks in the middle of the day, or soliciting the opinion of a colleague from another department. Reframing ideas. During a brainstorming session, you will likely come up with good ideas that seem too complicated or hard to implement. Lateral thinking encourages you to take these ideas seriously rather than immediately dismissing them. You should examine your restrictions and ask what financial, operational, or time constraints create a barrier to entry. With that information, you can try to reformulate the idea from different perspectives until it becomes more viable. Try random entry. When you feel stuck on a certain thinking pattern, random entry can shake things up and stimulate lateral thinking. Random entry introduces a random word or image to a brainstorming session. Even if it seems unrelated, try associating it with the problem at hand. The process of making those connections can help you come up with out of the box ideas. Mind mapping. Mind maps are a common brainstorming technique that helps teams visualize problems to find more expansive ideas. You begin with a central problem and break it into smaller pieces until you have a larger document with many ideas in one place. Seeing everything together fosters more creative connections, and studies have shown that mind mapping helps people retain and develop information more effectively. Lateral thinking also has the potential to become disorganized with many different ideas at play, and mind maps can avoid that problem by keeping everything in one place. One example of this describes a NASA scientist who solved the issue of distorted Hubble telescope lenses after noticing an adjustable showerhead in a German hotel, which inspired the idea of using extendable mirrors. To encourage such creativity, some managers reorganize teams or hire people with varied backgrounds, keeping ideas fresh and challenging traditional thinking. Similarly, individuals can spark creativity by changing daily routines, trying new activities, meeting different people, or altering habits to engage new parts of the brain. Companies like Unilever, Greetings, and Nike also promote this approach. Unilever managers spend time with customers to gain insights. American Greetings encourages designers to explore other industries, and Nike drew design inspiration from the automotive world for the Air Jordan XIX. Alex Osborne, the creator of brainstorming, and his contributions to developing creative thinking techniques, states that one of his most effective methods is the use of a checklist, often applied to encourage lateral thinking in new and unconventional ways. This checklist is especially useful when improving an existing product or service, such as modifying a cell phone design to boost sales. By systematically going through the checklist, action-oriented cues, people can employ multiple ways to enhance or reinvent an idea. The passive This also, concept of using opposites as a tool to stimulate creativity. Considering opposites helps expand thinking by encouraging people to look at a problem from completely different perspectives. These opposites can be physical, such as big or small, hard or soft, or biological, like young or old, male or female, managerial, bureaucratic, entrepreneurial, or top down, bottom up, or even business related, buy, sell, or profit loss. By examining these contrasting ideas, individuals and teams can challenge assumptions, discover fresh insights, and generate innovative solutions. Next, this brings us to the concept of creative intuition and how it plays a crucial role in the creative process. Creativity is described as having two main stages. First, data gathering, where the mind collects and absorbs information about a problem. And secondly, insight, when a sudden intuitive idea is revealed from within the subconscious. This intuitive stage can be difficult for some business leaders to trust because it feels less logical or tangible. However, the subconscious mind retains far more information than the conscious mind and can make connections that analytical thinking might overlook, giving intuition a much broader and deeper reach. This also explores how flashes of creativity tend to appear. Many people report that their best ideas come during relaxed everyday activities such as while taking a shower. One man, for example, consistently experienced bursts of inspiration in the shower and even began writing ideas on a plastic paper to capture them. Such moments of creativity often occur during a mental pause, when the brain is simultaneously relaxed and slightly engaged, such as during walking, exercising, driving, or meditating. These low pressure activities allow the conscious analytical mind to rest, creating space for the subconscious to surface new insights. Creativity often occurs during a mental pause, a period of mixed tension and relaxation. In the shower, while exercising, driving, walking, or meditating, the mind reverts to a neutral, somewhat unfocused state in which it is receptive to issues or themes that have not been resolved. A temporary activity that is relatively simple can provide the moment for a creative flash from deep in the subconscious. If the analytical part of the mind is too focused and active, it shuts down the spontaneous part. The semi relaxed mental pause is like putting the analytical left brain on hold and giving room for the intuitive right brain to find a solution in the subconscious mind. C.S. Lewis, the author of the Chronicles of Narnia, was fond of long contemplative walks to facilitate his creative juices. Novelist Stephen King runs several miles most mornings. One study even shows that a single aerobic workout is enough to kick the brains of college students into high gear for a couple of hours, which means that physical exercise may be as effective as the shower for triggering the appropriate relaxed state that enables creative intuition to break through. So next, here's a short challenge to test your creative intuition. Feel free to answer, or you could put your answer in the chat. So in the illustration above, remove 3 matches to leave 4. So in a short explanation for the answer, the puzzle depends on how you interpret the word 4. So rather than counting 4 matches to remove the matches at the top, bottom, and right, and the answer is the Roman numeral for the number 4. Next, we move on to implementing change. Change is inevitable, and while leaders often view innovation and creativity as powerful ways to strengthen an organization, many employees see change as disruptive or uncomfortable. A key part of guiding people through change is recognizing that resistance is natural and often rooted in valid concerns. Next slide. One major reason employees resist change is that it can disrupt the personal compact, the set of mutual expectations and commitments that define the relationship between employees and their organization. This compact includes elements such as job duties, performance standards, evaluation methods, and compensation packages.
which are usually clearly stated or written down. However, it also involves factors like mutual trust, loyalty, and shared values. When employees feel that change threatens or violates these understandings, resistance tends to arise. For example, when a new manager at the Dallas Fort Worth Marriott tried to replace the existing incentive system with one based on the hotel's financial performance, employees pushed back. They felt as if their they felt as if their benefits were being taken away, leading the manager to describe their reaction as, "Here comes the wicked witch of the West taking my stuff away." Such reactions can be minimized when leaders use effective management tools and communication strategies to introduce innovation and change in a way that maintains trust and respects the personal compact. Leaders can improve the chances for a successful outcome by following Cotter's 8-stage model discussed earlier in this chapter and using the strategies we discussed for everyday change. In addition, the leaders organize people for change by engaging their hearts as well as their minds. Effective leaders use elements such as storytelling, metaphor, humor, symbolism, and a personal touch to reach people on an emotional level and sell them on proposed changes. As discussed in Chapter 9, emotional elements are essential for persuading and influencing others. Leaders should not overlook the importance of emotional elements to overcome resistance to change. In his 1996 book, Leading Change, John Cotter, professor emeritus at Harvard Business School, outlined an 8-stage process that leaders should follow in leading major change. With this book, The Heart of Change, Cotter teamed up with consultant Dan Cohen to look at the typical problems leaders face at each of the 8 stages. The author's main finding is that the biggest barriers to change involve people's attitudes and behaviors. Change comes easier, the authors argue, when people see reasons for change that touch their emotions rather than being presented with rational analysis that attempts to change their thinking. Consider these 3 examples connected to the 3 of the 8 change stages. Stage 1, establish a sense of urgency. Stage 4, widely communicate the vision and strategy. And stage 5, empowering employees. Next slide. Leaders use several key techniques to make the change process smoother and more effective. This involves communication and training, which are among the most important tools. Open, honest communication helps reduce uncertainty, builds trust, and gives employees a sense of control. One study found that change efforts often fail because employees hear about the changes from outsiders rather than from their own leaders. Many top executives focus on communicating with shareholders or the public, but neglect to inform the employees most affected. To prevent this, leaders should communicate face to face instead of relying solely on memos or emails. Additionally, employees often need training to handle new tasks or responsibilities. For example, Canadian Airlines International spent over a year training its workforce before introducing new reservation, airport, cargo, and financial systems, ensuring a smoother transition. Participation and involvement are also powerful strategies. When employees help design and implement changes, they feel more ownership and commitment. Although this approach takes time, it greatly improves understanding and acceptance. A study comparing 2 companies adopting a new computer technology found that the organization using a participatory approach experienced far fewer problems and smoother implementation. Lastly, coercion may be used as a last resort. In some urgent situations, leaders may need to threaten job loss, demotions, or reassignments to enforce change. For instance, Coca-Cola's new CEO had to reassign or dismiss several top managers who resisted his revitalization plans. However, coercion is risky. It often creates anger and resentment, leading to sabotage or low morale. As shown by the leaders at Raytheon Missile Systems, communication, training, and participation generally produce far better results than trying to force change upon employees. We are now moving on to the two phases of change. Effectively and humanely leading change is one of the greatest challenges for leaders. The nature and pace of change in today's environment can be exhilarating and even fun, but it can also be inconvenient, painful, and downright scary. Even when a change appears to be good for individual employees as well as the organization, it can lead to decreased morale, lower commitment, and diminished trust if not handled carefully. Some changes that may be necessary for the good of the organization can cause real negative consequences for individual employees who may experience high levels of stress and are compelled to quickly learn entirely new tasks and ways of working, or possibly lose their jobs. Some of the most difficult changes are those related to structure, such as redefining positions and responsibilities, re-engineering the company, redesigning jobs, departments, or divisions, or downsizing the organization. In many cases, these types of changes mean that people will be seriously hurt because they will lose their jobs. Next, downsizing. This is one of the most difficult situations leaders face. They have to handle the layoffs in a way that eases the pain and tension for departing employees and maintains the trust, morale, and performance of employees who remain with the organization. Leadership in times of downsizing. The deliberate reduction of a company's workforce requires sensitivity, transparency, and strategic planning. In the 1990s, layoffs were relatively uncommon, but the economic downturn of the early 2000s made large-scale downsizing widespread among American corporations. Today, it often accompanies major organizational changes such as re-engineering, mergers, acquisitions, outsourcing, global competition, and the shift from an industrial to an information-based economy. Although downsizing is sometimes necessary for restructuring or financial recovery, research shows that it often fails to deliver expected benefits and can even harm the organization if poorly managed. When layoffs are unavoidable, leaders must anticipate heightened stress, conflict, and declining morale and trust. To ease the process, communication is essential. Leaders should give employees advanced notice, share as much information as possible, and be open about uncertainties rather than staying silent. Involving employees in decisions, such as setting criteria for which jobs are eliminated, can build fairness and transparency. Offering voluntary exit incentives, job sharing, or part-time arrangements can also reduce the negative impact. Providing support for displaced workers is another crucial step. Severance pay, extended benefits, retraining opportunities, outplacement assistance, and counseling can help employees transition more smoothly while showing compassion. This care also reassures remaining workers, easing their guilt and anxiety and maintaining trust in leadership. Some companies even offer counseling to help employees cope with the emotional aftermath of layoffs. Ultimately, even in turbulent times, leaders who approach downsizing with honesty, empathy, and fairness can help the organization emerge stronger, keeping the remaining workforce motivated, productive, and committed to rebuilding a positive future. With that being said, the summary of this chapter. This reminds us that leaders have tools and approaches to foster creativity, innovation, and effective change management. Change is inevitable, and the rapid pace of today's global environment creates challenges for leaders guiding organizations through adaptation. A major reason many organizations fail to adjust is a lack of effective change leadership. Successful change leaders define themselves as such, articulate a clear vision for the future, and promote values that support adaptability. They are courageous, capable of managing complexity and uncertainty, trust followers to take responsibility for change, and learn from their own mistakes. Major changes are difficult, but following structured models like the 8-stage model of planned change and employing daily strategies such as creative self expression, seizing the right opportunities, and alliance building can increase success. Leading for innovation is another significant challenge. Leaders can foster creativity by creating environments that encourage it, guided by 5 elements: alignment, creative values, unofficial activity, diverse stimuli, and internal communication. These elements mirror traits of creative individuals who tend to be more open to change. While some people are naturally more creative, research suggests everyone has roughly equal creative potential, which leaders can nurture through brainstorming, lateral thinking, and creative intuition. Implementation is also a critical part of change. Leaders must understand why people resist change and how to address it using communication and training, participation and involvement, or, as a last resort, coercion. They should also recognize that change can produce both positive and negative effects. One of the most difficult challenges is downsizing, where leaders must balance easing the hardships of departing employees with maintaining the morale, trust, and commitment of those who remain. And that brings us to the end of the chapter for leading change. We thank you all for listening.